a wonderful Friday morning. I have one quick housekeeping announcement. Cheryl will yell at me if I don't say this. The next NP seminar is going to be Dr. Edward Chang, May 13th in BRB 105. Moving on to today's speaker, it is a privilege and an honor to introduce not only a mentor but a friend, Dr. Geoffrey Ling. Dr. Ling started his educational training in New York City. We won't talk about your high school, but got his bachelor's at Washington University in St. Louis, went on to complete a PhD in pharmacology at Cornell, and after a storied research career, actually completed his MD degree 7 years later at Georgetown University, at which time the federal government decided to pay for his training, and he put on a uniform, much like I did. Served over 20 years in the Army with a number of combat deployments. He's a true Renaissance man in the field of medicine with expertise not only in clinical medicine, research, and leadership, and in fact the last over 10 years of his time, he was working in DARPA, leading and developing the Biological Sciences Office. And he's going to talk to us today a bit about developing ideas and the process of bringing them to market. Without further ado, Jeff.
Thanks, Ron. Ron and I have been friends for a long time. In fact, Ron and I met just before he started medical school, of all things, and I take the blame for coaxing him to join the Army. But it was a good day for the Army, and Ron still has the distinction of being the only neurology resident to graduate from Walter Reed to have a perfect score on the in-service examination, which is extraordinary. And I think there's a lot of actually neurology programs that never had anybody graduate from their program with a perfect score on the in-service exam, and that was about 50 points higher than I got. So this was great. So today, we're going to talk about innovation, because I think that'd be a fun thing to talk about with my friends here in the audience, because you guys innovate every day. For me, I was really super lucky, because when I came back from my Afghanistan in 2003, I got to go to a place called DARPA. And DARPA was an amazingly innovative opportunity for me to go and do things to help my fellow service members. So when we think about innovation, we always think about really cool stuff, genes and high tech and blah, 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 but sometimes that isn't the thing. One of the first projects I had at the agency was an offshoot of something I had started when I was at the university, but it was really a simple thing, and I wanted to show it to you. So some things just have to be simple and practical. So if you take a look at these first providers up here, what are they doing? They're doing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, right? That's what they're doing. And that's great, because you need to save somebody, you have to give them mouth-to-mouth. But what's happening when they're doing this? The question is what they're not doing. And so if you're a medic, and you're the only member, or the only medical team member for a group of, let's say, 12 or 30 different service members, and they're engaged in a firefight, and you're mouth-to-mouthing one of them, or you're bagging one of them, what are you not doing? You're not taking care of anybody else, right? So what is not being done is everything else that's needed. So what's the solution? Either one, you don't breathe this person, you let them die while you're tending to everybody else, or you come up with this simple ventilator. And this ventilator was one of the first projects that came out of DARPA when I was there, was the SAVE ventilator, simplified ventilator. It's the size of a Harry Potter book. You see it, you hold it in one hand, it has an on-off switch, and it's super, super simple. Super, super simple. All you do is you hook the tubing up to this little mouthpiece over here, and then it provides the breaths. It provides the breaths. You put a little strap over here, and you walk away, and that's what you do. And you say, well, geez, there are some patients that may not survive, that may not be adequate for. Well, it's not a 100% solution, but it's an 80% solution. But it frees up this guy to go take care of everybody else. And so this is FDA approved. It's airworthy. It was a short DARPA program. The performers only wanted $500,000. It was really two dudes in a garage. And gave them $500,000. Actually, I gave them $250,000 first to build a prototype. They did it. I gave them another $250,000 to go ahead and make it better. This thing now is fully FDA approved. It's in manufacturing. Hundreds have been sold. Really, really happy. It's on every helicopter in the U.S. Military right now. And a whole number of medics are carrying it. So didn't cost $10 million, didn't cost $100 million, it cost a lousy $500,000, and then these two folks took it and ran with it, and I'm super proud of them. They commercialized it, which I want them to do, but it's an idea here, do something simple, something practical, something fast. And that is an example of a low-tech but very practical solution. What about something high-tech? And this was my prosthetics program. So you saw that a preponderance of those injuries are, in fact, extremity wounds. No surprise, because our body armor is really, really good. The body armor is very, very good. You can take a rifle round right to the chest if you're wearing your plates, and you'll survive it. But the extremities and the head, by the way, that's why TBI is so prevalent, and the extremities have a disproportionate share then of these severe injuries, because you're surviving the belly and the chest wounds. So the lower extremity, we felt that was not necessary to do. Why? Because the VA. God bless the VA. The VA has, the NIH has kind of ignored prosthetics for a long period of time, but the VA, God bless them, during the dark years, were actually the primary supporters of advances in lower extremity prosthetics. And in fact, some of them are phenomenal, as you know. I mean, Oscar Pistorius ran in the Olympics before he decided to go and shoot his girlfriend. So, and that gives you an idea of how functional those prostheses are. However, the upper extremity is not as good, right? The upper extremity is not as good. Right now, anybody who is in physiatry or physical medicine or physical therapy knows that all you get is the end-terminal device is a hook. That is, in fact, the most useful end-terminal device is a hook. So we don't believe that that is the ultimate end state of where we would like to be in an upper extremity prosthetic. So what we decided to do is go and ask patients what they wanted. And if you ask a patient what they want, this is, in fact, the Motion Dynamics upper extremity prosthetic, which is really wonderful in terms of functionality, but it's ugly as sin. So 50% of patients won't wear it because it is ugly as sin. The newest innovation from this metal hook is the Autobach end-terminal device. Now you look at it and say, well, gee, you could do a lot with it. You could open, you could use a fork and a spoon. You might be able to use a pen, but take a look at that thing. I mean, imagine if you used that yourself. Every day when you woke up in the morning, went to the bathroom, and took care of your morning needs, by the afternoon you're going to need a proctologist. So this is not desirable. So you ask yourself, what do patients want? So patients don't want this ugly old thing. What a patient wants is an arm like Luke Skywalker has or Del Spooner has, right? I mean, a patient doesn't want to look like Captain Hook and Peter Pan. A patient would like to look like Del Spooner. Well, heck, I'd like to look like Del Spooner. But the reality is that's what they want. So you say to yourself, okay, if that's what you want, then what does it take to get there? And obviously it takes two things. It takes a really super great robotic arm that looks like an arm, feels like an arm, and actually has the weight of an arm. And you want to control it the same way that Del and Luke control theirs, simply by thinking about it, right? And those are the two things you want to do. And that, so us, was a worthy DARPA project. So we went ahead and set out to do that. But it was based upon the notional work of just brain-machine interfacing. And Alan Rudolph and Eric Eisenstadt, who preceded me at the agency, actually started this program called HAND, or Human-Assisted Neurodevices. And they funded one really remarkable investigator by the name of Dr. Miguel Nicoleas, who many of you know. And Miguel did this really cool series of studies where he actually taught monkeys how to play a Pong game by working a joystick to move a red moving dot onto a green box. And a monkey will get rewarded. But all the while, Miguel is measuring the neural field firing potentials that are occurring over the motor cortex relative to the arm. And it's through those really seminal work that he showed that you could actually, one, measure the signals with the fidelity necessary to understand what they're supposed to do, and two, to actually correlate it with behavior. And that was like amazing stuff. That was just amazing stuff. But it proved that it could be done. And that's what Miguel got. Subsequent to that, we started working with Andy Schwartz, who I hope many of you know also. And Andy's like really a brilliant guy. And Andy actually said, look, I could do the same thing. And instead of running a Pong game, which is in two-dimensional space, I can actually have a monkey work a robotic arm using just cortical signals and have it work in three-dimensional space. And so Andy went ahead and did that, which was really great. And this is some of Andy's stuff. And this was the work. This specific video was actually work that he did under DARPA funding. And as you can see, he has the monkey out here who's going to reach out, grab the piece of marshmallow, put it and stick it in his mouth, and does it very nicely. As I said, it's in three-dimensional space, which is like super cool. So again, we're now clearly, these investigators showed us that you can not only, one, measure the signals, but you could actually measure to the level that you can determine what the functional intent is. And so with that, it led us to start our program. And we have two paths to this program. One path was, in fact, just to build the arm itself. Somebody built us a cool robotic arm. And that robotic arm, and this was Tony Tedler's idea, and I have to give him credit for it, because he said, look, have somebody build a great robot arm for you that could be hooked up cortically, but didn't have to be hooked up cortically. Because he says, you don't know. If this fails, at least the young service members will have something at the end of the day. And so that was really cool, a great idea. And so we went ahead and had that. But that was a 2-year performance period. They had to come up with first prototype within 24 months. And the second one was actually have it cortically controlled. So there were two teams. The first team, many of you may know, was run by Dean Kamen's group at DECA Research. He came up. We didn't have many people. We had a lot of people say that they could do this. Very few said they could do it in the 24-month performance period. That was the really hard part. Dean came right up and said, yeah, we could do it in 24 months. And so we contracted with him. The 4-year group, we recognized that needed perhaps another robot arm, a different kind of robot arm, as well as really needed the neuroscientists. And so that was headed by the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, Mike McLaughlin. And Mike pulled together a really wonderful team. He and Stu Harshbarger, who then left the program, but it was really Mike who really carried it over the finish line, brought in Andy Schwartz, he brought in Chris Shenoy, he brought in Rich Anderson, he brought in Mark Schreiber up at the University of Rochester, really a who's who of neuroscientists. But the key thing is integrating all their work. Because scientists like to work in their own lab, with their own equipment, on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, right? What he said was, no, we're all going to have to work on common platforms, we're all going to have to work together, and so he created actually a really neat a platform whereby all of the investigators who worked on this program had to demonstrate that their science actually would be efficacious in this particular platform. This is what it takes to really do something that is very bold, right? When you bring together disparate groups, you give them a common goal and a common platform. So when my mom was working on the US space program back in the late 50s and early 60s, actually all the way up through Apollo 15, she remembered that the thing that the moonshot, I already talked about a moonshot, but what she remembers most, because she's an engineer, just like a lot of you guys are, my mom remembered that it was specific to a certain lift platform. It had a very specific goal, going to the moon and coming back, and they had to do it within a 10-year time frame. So all those things, as she as an engineer, made it a very clear path on what it took to get there. Right? So there's a lot of speculative things you would throw out, a lot of risky things that you would try, but that's how, in fact, they did it. And so I modeled this after what my mom had said and said, look, give a certain timeline, give a specific platform, and a specific goal in mind, and remarkable people do remarkable things. And so there were two levels to this thing. So let's cut to the chase, because this program has pretty much gotten where it wants to go. This is that 2-year path with the DECA arm. The DECA arm was delivered. The Gen 1 was delivered in 2008. We then, at that point, started phase 2, which was another 2 years to do the clinical trials necessary to mature this. And the clinical trials were done by my good friends, the VA. On a cold winter day, I went over to the VA. I went to headquarters. I spoke to Joe Francis, Trish Dorn, Fred Downs, and they were wonderful. And I said, look, we've got this thing made. I need a clinical partner. And I want it to be the Veterans Administration. And they stepped up and they said, let's do it. And Linda Resnick took lead of that part and off to the races. And they have been the best, absolute best partners anybody could ask for. VA, by the way, picked up the tab on the clinical side of it, picked up the whole tab. And we picked up the tab on building this. Truly a government-to-government agencies working together. And we had together strong-arm FDA, but that's a different story. So at the end of 4 years, the final design was done. Gen 3 was delivered at 4 years, so it's 2 years for the prototype 1, 2 more years to refine it in the clinical trials. And this is what it looks like. This is it. And it was put before FDA. It took FDA another 3 years to approve it because they gave it a de novo classification, much to my chagrin. But it is what it is, but it is. On May 2014, got full FDA approval. So concept to full FDA approval in 7 years. Concept to full FDA approval in 7 years. We're very proud of that. This is now in manufacturing as we speak. all right? So it's a modular-based system. Notice that. If you only need a hand, you get the hand. If you're a transhumeral, you'll get the transhumeral version with an elbow. If you're a complete shoulder dysartic, you'll get the whole thing. So it's a really nice platform. This one is not brain controlled. I'm going to show you the video of Chuck using it without its sleeve and stuff on. But this is Chuck. He's a bilateral amputee, and I'll show you how he uses it. And it's really kind of neat. It's all based upon the Segway type of approach. When you turn, it turns. You lean forward, it leans forward, that sort of thing. And it has a local control in the fingers. It's got stabilization. And it's got a foot switch that gives you 6 cardinal grips. But it gives you a lot of functionality, particularly if you have no arms at all, such as Chuck. So this is it. That's Randy. Randy has the full shoulder disarticulated version. Chuck, I should say, was a transhumeral, so he has the elbow and the wrist and the hand, but he doesn't have the shoulder. He doesn't need it, but he has it. And, they're obviously handing off a golf ball to each other. Pouring water. Looks very natural movements. I mean, this is really a nice, wonderful piece of work that the DECA guys had done. That's Chuck picking up a grape.
What's he using for to do the prehensile work?
So there's a foot switch that gives you 6 cardinal grips.
What?
There's a foot switch that gives you 6 cardinal grips, right? And that's what that's how that's done. Very nice. Let's pick up a Skittle because it has these local force controls in the fingers, so it knows just enough to grip without collapsing or breaking. So you can see Chuck has no arms at all. And when he shrugs like that, that's what he's actually activating the foot switch. It's a close-up of the grape. He's picking one of those bottles you get from Costco. You hold it too tight, water cascades out the top. You hold too loose, it slips out. But you can see he has a nice thing. So those local force grips are actually pretty good in terms of just giving enough grip to hold and not squish the bottle. So pretty good, really good. So Chuck was able, with his arm, now started a lawn servicing company of his own. So he's actually gone back to work, which he hasn't done in 20 years. He was on total disability for 20 years. And but now he's gone back. And so to me, it represents a tremendous breakthrough in the sense that it's giving people back functionality in their lives. Now, what can't Chuck do with that? He's got 5 fingers, but he can't independently move them. He has these grips that you get 6 different grips with the foot switch and all that. So it gives him a high degree of functionality, but certainly it's not the arm of which we all, our goal was. But it was an intermediate step. And I say that this is great because no surgery is needed for this. It's what I call the strap-and-go arm. In fact, I put the thing on myself, and I got to use it, and within 2 hours, you actually get a high degree of functionality just because it's so natural the way the DECA guys made the thing. But really, the goal of this thing was brain control, right? That's really what we wanted, natural brain control of sensation. And so the neuroscientists all worked together. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, and you guys know a lot of this data. This is the arm that the APL team put together. And what's really nice about this arm is the 108 onboard sensors that it has. These are sensors for light touch, for pressure. It has vibratory for proprioception. And it actually has pain. It has temperature. It does not have pain, but it does have temperature. This thing was produced. It looks really great, especially when its sleeve is on. But then it was hooked up with, in Andy Schwartz's lab, with Mike Boninger, who's head of physiatry at the VA, I might add, in Pittsburgh. And this was done using ECOG. And this was a nice collaboration with NIH. NIH actually paid for the ECOG part of this, and we at DARPA paid for the arm and all that other stuff. And so what you're going to see here is something that looks pretty kludgy. And I like to show this video because it's a first-time video. I asked the guys when they said, oh, Jeff, on September 27th, we're going to have our first patient. We're going to hook them up, and we're going to turn the machine on and see what happens. And I said, that's way cool. But I said, film it. Please film it. Because, if the machine catches on fire, well, it'll become a, blooper for all time's sake. But it is a historical moment, right? I mean, it's such a cool moment. So go ahead and just hook it up, and let's see what happens. And so that's what they did. So it's going to look a little kludgy. So I'm just letting you know. This is the first time that Andy and Mike went ahead and had a patient do it. But what they did was, all they asked the patient to do was they hooked it up, put your hand up, down, left, or right. That's all they asked them to do on September 27th, 2011. And the patient name is Tim, and patient Tim actually has a high cervical lesion, so he's a quadriplegic, all right? And he had this ECOG placed on the surface of his cortex, subdurally, right over the motor cortex. And this thing, as many of you know, is only the size of your thumbnail. All right, so that's how big this thing is. Super small, so you really don't need a lot of ECOG signal for this. But this is what he did with ECOG, and I want to show you this. This is really cool. And what you'll see is Tim's fiance is sitting to his left, and his physical therapist, that's his physical therapist, that's his fiance. And so they just turned it on, so he's getting used to it. And the voice you hear is the computer saying up, down, left, or right. And the ding means go, and the second ding means he got it.
Nice.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, that's nice, solid. Yeah.
Sorry.
That was the first day. That was really cool. I mean, because immediately they broke script from going into the up, down, left, and right. And the reaction of his fiance, I think, was really remarkable. She called it his arm, right? It's not his arm. Look at this thing. I mean, it is a robot arm on a pedestal, not even close to him. But it's the way he interacts with it and the way she's interacting with him and it. And I think that shows you the power of the human spirit when you're faced with these kinds of advances. So to me, that was really, really, really cool. When I first got that, and I showed it to Regina Dugan, who was the DARPA director at the time, and I said, this is a DARPA moment. I mean, you actually get somebody cortically controlling a robotic device. That was really very cool. Now, admittedly, it looks kludgy. I totally accept that. But, that was in of September 27th of 2011. Now, if you think about it, you say, geez, what other great advances have happened in mankind that we're very familiar with, of course, is powered flight, right? And powered flight in 1903 by the Wright brothers was Flyer 1 being shoved off the cliff of down in North Carolina, and the thing flew. But it didn't fly for real long. It flew for like 8-10 seconds, something like that. It was loud, it was smelly, and so a bunch of people were watching are probably thinking, oh man, all this hullabaloo for a thing that only flew for a lousy 8 to 10 seconds. What the hell good is it, right? But then you're going to get other people who are going to say, like, wow, that's like way cool. I mean, man has been trying for like 5,000 years to have powered flight, and these dudes totally pulled it off. I see opportunity here. I'm going to start FedEx. I'm going to start, Pan Am. Oh, maybe not Pan Am. Well, I'm going to start Southwest Airlines, and on it goes. So, and they said, so the question is for us, each of us is like, what does this mean? Is this something that's really cool? More than a guy controlling a robot arm, all right, in a kludgy sort of way. But if you think about the progress of flight, there's so many people who are really cool when they see once it's done, how to leverage against it. Think about the history of flight, right? So in 1903, you had Flyer 1, but 15 years later, which is really not a very long time in human history, it was the advent of World War I. And what were airplanes like in World War I? I mean, they were actually pretty capable machines at that point. Then you say, well, geez, 1903, if I think 35 years later, 1938, the dawn of World War II, what were airplanes like then? They were really incredible machines. And then you think, oh my gosh, what about 66 years after not even a full lifetime? 66 years after 1903, of course, was 1969, and Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. So the progression of advances in aviation were phenomenal. It's almost mind-boggling, right? And how fast they progressed. What about this? So this was September 27th of 2011. Let's look at May of 2012. So this is May of 2012, 7 months later, 7 months. And this patient, Jan, also has a high cervical lesion. Hers is from spinal muscular atrophy, but nevertheless, it left her as a functional quadriplegic. She had one of the little Utah rays implanted, all right? So now penetrating electrodes rather than surface cortical electrode, but nevertheless, pretty much the same concept, right? And along the way, Mike and Andy learned an awful lot from working with the patients, working with Tim. So what did refine the algorithms, all that stuff. But what did it look like 7 months later? It looked like this.
Put it up and straight down and left and right and diagonally. I can close it and open it, and I can go forward and back.
That is just the most astounding thing I've ever seen. Can we shake hands?
Sure.
No, really?
Yeah.
Like, come right over here?
Yes, you come over there.
Okay.
Grasp your hand, there we go.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And I can do a fist bump if you'd like.
That's amazing.
And it is amazing. It's really extraordinary. And so it shows you how fast progress can go as this goes further. So now, from the basic science standpoint, where these guys reside, they actually have, and I'll let Justin Sanchez talk about it because he took over the program from me, but they're actually putting sensory back in. And so Nathan, a new patient, actually can, with his blindfolded, can tell you which fingers he's using and can actually identify shapes using his robot arm to do that, because he also has a quad. But before I left, I wanted to see where else could we take this technology, right? Because in the end, it is a human controlling a device, an external device, cortically. So what else can we do? So we decided to try this, and we did this. This is Jan, the same lady that was on that 60 Minutes piece, and what she's doing here is she's going to fly an airplane. And so what the guys did was they hooked her directly into the flight control system, and they had her fly, this is right out of the box, this is immediate. They had her fly this aircraft, she never had a flight lesson in her life, fly this trainer at 1 times speed, and then they said she was so good, they sped it up 8 times and had her fly through the Grand Canyon. And then after that, for fun, we hooked her up to the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. And although it's a little wobbly, she's diving here, she's climbing, she doesn't crash, she has level flight, and it was really very cool. And if you asked her what her experience was, she'll tell you, I was just flying. And that, to me, is really very cool. So it tells you, as this technology evolves, that our relationship with how we control external devices is going to fundamentally change. And I think that's really, really cool. And the devices that we have now, these things, this thing, and all that, are going to fundamentally change because of our ability to interact with these devices. Naturally, we have to do some major breakthroughs. I'm expecting the folks in this audience to do it. We have to get these signals out non-invasively. We have to think of other applications, and on it goes. But that's for the future. And right now, I think it's a very exciting time in the world of neuroscience and neuroengineering and in biomedical engineering. So let me change gears a little bit, because you probably say, well, Jeff, you're a one-trick pony. And to a large extent I am, but I still am committed to my warriors. And so when I was in Afghanistan, I had a patient who had a severe brain injury and who developed dysautonomia. And what that is that it's uncontrolled blood pressure, heart rate, things like that. And I couldn't put him on the airplane in that state because there's just no way that the transport team could manage him. And I needed a drug called bromocriptine. And there was no bromocriptine in the whole stinking country. It just didn't exist. So I had to call back and I said, I need this bromocriptine drug because I need to stabilize this patient to get him out of theater. And so the Air Force, God bless them, somebody, I'm not joking, ran to the launch stool, got some bromocriptine out of the pharmacy, ran to the airfield at Ramstein, loaded it onto an airplane, and they flew this one little box of bromocriptine to me in Afghanistan. That must have been a $50,000 box of bromocriptine, But it said to me, this doesn't make any damn sense at all. Because bromocriptine is an organic compound. It's a small organic molecule. That's all it is, which means it's made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. That's it. And some of its other drugs have a little bit of nitrogen, a little bit of sulfur, but that's it. 5 elemental things. Why can't we just make the thing in theater? Why do I have to get a box flown to me from God knows where? So we set up this program called Pharmacy on Demand, and the idea is to take this big old pharmacy, and instead of having this one, this is actually the bathroom, so don't look at this. This is actually the pharmacy that we had here, this little container thing over here, all right, this little container thing over here. That's all the drugs that we had at our combat support hospital in Afghanistan. And I tell you, half that stuff we totally did not need. It was just the supply guys thought this is what you would need. Turns out we didn't need it, all right? We needed more ibuprofen, we needed more antibiotics. We did not need atropine, all right? Because they said, well, there may be a chemical attack. There's no chemical attack. We didn't need all those boxes of atropine. So we ended up throwing it out because it expired. So this approach is so wasteful. It doesn't make sense at all. Why not have a machine that will basically be an organic synthesizer and just synthesize the things you need, have all the reagents you need, and just push buttons? Why can't you do that? And this is what the cache looked like in Afghanistan. This is 452nd, who I served with 2003. It was a tent city. So, and so that's what we set out to do. But along the way, as we set out to make this machine that will make drugs at point of care, something else popped up. I don't know if you guys ever heard about this. So this is, there was a hedge fund manager, a young guy named Martin Shkreli, and basically what he did was he bought the rights to make pyrimethamine, which is Daraprim, all right? This is a drug. Now this drug has been around forever. This was first synthesized by Eli Lilly in 1958. So it's no longer, it's totally off patent, it's totally a generic drug. And it was being made in 2010 and sold for $1 a pill, $1 a pill. Now Daraprim's sort of important. Why? Because it treats a disease called toxoplasmosis. Now toxoplasmosis is not going to affect any of you, but if you had AIDS or you had cancer, you're at high risk of getting toxo. And if you don't treat toxo, toxo will kill you. And it will kill you in a very bad way. So, but this drug will totally treat and cure toxoplasmosis. So it's great. Well, the Canadians bought the rights to pyrimethamine back in 2015, and immediately when they did that, they jacked the price to $13.50. They just did it. They just did it. It didn't cost them any more to make it. They just did it because they can make money. But what happened was Martin Shkreli basically bought the rights from the Canadians, set up a drug company called Turin Pharmaceuticals, and he jacked the price of $750 a pill. $750 for a life-saving drug that cost him less than $1 to make. And you know why he did it? To make money. He's a hedge fund manager. In fact, when Congress called him to task on it, you ought to look at it on YouTube. This guy's the most arrogant guy you'll ever see. He sat there, he's a 32-year-old guy. He's worth, at that time, he was worth $45 million. And he just basically said, I don't owe anything to the patients, I owe everything to my investors. And they want me to maximize the dollar, and I can sell for $750 a pill, and so I will. Guess how, and Congress said, well, we're gonna fix you, right? And they got him up on fraud charges for something else, they put him in jail, blah, blah, blah. But guess what? Today, you know how much he's worth? Yeah, he's sitting in jail. You know how much he's worth? $100 million. $100 million, that's how much he's worth, no joke. And guess what Daraprim costs? Here at CCF. $750 a pill. So it didn't do a damn thing. And so this is very scary. You know what Pfizer did 2 weeks later? They doubled the price of their new cancer drug, because they could. And if you go, I can go down the line of what the cost of generic drugs are right now. Nicardipine, a drug that Ron and I use regularly for controlling blood pressure in emergencies, that's now $100 a vial. Used to be 75 cents. Now $100 a vial. This is a major cause of runaway drug costs. And why? Because these drug companies, he only runs it. So you know how he keeps that $750 a pill? Super easy. He makes it. He just doesn't make a lot of it. So the drug shortages are a big deal. So this is why batch processing. This is a big reason why. Batch processing is controlled by a handful of overseas manufacturers. I told you the Canadians bought it. Turin actually makes the thing in India. And that's where the things, 80% of our generic drugs are made in India and China at an isolated number of factories. They control the supply, and if you control the supply, you have an impact on demand. If you have an impact on demand, you have an impact on price. So our model was, screw this. Let's take this machine that we were making for our far forward providers, and this is what it looks like. This is it. You're looking at it. It's 4 feet tall by 2 foot by 2 foot. It's nothing more than a organic chemistry synthesizing system. That's all it is. It has a number of basic reagents in it. It's a closed system. But what's really nice about it is that because it's small and compact, we can actually increase the pressure and temperature, so we can speed the rates of reaction that way. And the third thing that we can do is we can actually add more steps in it than a batch processing would allow. If you're doing batch processing, every time you add another step in the synthetic process, of course you have to add another big bunch of machinery to the line. Here you don't have to do that. It's all self-contained. And so what we do here is we do a process called continuous manufacturing. Basically, you make what you need when you need it. And because we can add more steps, we can start earlier in the synthetic process, meaning we can start at more basic reagents. So we can start, for example, with just acetone and ammonia salt, for example. And that is super great because acetone and ammonia salt are super cheap. And so what that allows us to do then is make things significantly cheaper than they can make over here. And so our goal is to make this platform available to all the hospitals so they can make their own drugs and then charge only 10 cents a pill over cost. And if you're charging only 10 cents a pill over cost, you're going to way undercut this, and you're going to be able to drive down health costs dramatically. And so that is our dream. But this machine exists. This prototypic platform can make 14 different drug classes. It can make 1 million doses of atropine a day. This little itty-bitty machine can make 1 million doses of atropine a day. It can make 5,000 doses of Cipro a day. And I can go down the list, but it's not really important. But that's the thought. So when I came out of government, one of the first things I did was I started my own company around this platform. And we are now, I'm happy to say, that we raised enough money to get this thing mature enough to submit to FDA. And so we'll be submitting to FDA in 18 months to get approval for this, and making ciprofloxacin. What about the other types of drugs, the big protein drugs you would ask, the new ones like the monoclonal antibodies and those type of things, the interferons and all that? This machine is actually made also, we had two elements to that program. One was to make the small organics. This is to make the large organics. This is using cell-free extracts over here. This tri-station actually are miniature bioreactors. It fits in this Pelican case right here. It can make 500 micrograms of protein in 6 hours. And what's really nice about this, by using the cell-free process, it actually uses human cells. It doesn't use CHO cells or yeast cells or E. coli. It actually uses human cells, which really makes the back end of the polish and finish so much easier because you don't have to take out all these unnecessary glycosylations and things like that. So this machine also is the other half of it, and it will allow, right now this machine will make erythropoietin, streptokinase, human growth hormone, interferon beta, and right now we're working on making insulin. And the nice thing is if you make it a point of care, you don't need refrigeration. And so that's really super awesome too. And we believe that, by the way, what does the new monoclonal antibody for breast cancer cost right now? It costs $10,000 a dose. $10,000 a dose. If you had breast cancer, stage 4 breast cancer, and you had to pay 10 grand a dose to keep you alive, I think that's just unconscionable. And this, potentially, because of the way this thing works, we could make that same thing for about $5. And that'd be my dream. My dream is to drastically cut the price of medications for Americans and thereby get control of these incredible runaway costs. Because you don't need to do this, you just have to have that. Another thing that we decided to do was identify someone who will become symptomatically ill days before symptoms occur. In other words, identify who is going to get sick before they're actually sick. And the premises, of course, is pathophysiology begins at the subcellular level. That when you are going to get sick, you have subcellular changes, then you have organ level changes, and then ultimately you have manifestations at the global physiology, and that's when you feel bad. You have the sniffles, you have the cold, you have the impending myocardial infarction and the like. So the question here is can you identify those elements of the early pathophysiology that identify that you're going to be sick, all right? And the important thing is we don't care what the agent load is. So for example, in infectious diseases, everyone wants to measure what your agent load is. Who cares what the agent load is? You could be exposed to rhinovirus and fight it off. If you fight it off, as a provider, I don't care anymore because you're going to fight it off by yourself. But if you're not going to fight it off, then I do care. So I don't care if you have rhinovirus in your system. I don't care how you react to it. So the question is no longer the pathological agent, it's the host response. That's what matters. And so then if you know who became ill, potentially you could treat and cure them before they actually became ill, so nobody actually was ill. And so we went ahead and thought about this. We started working with the group at Duke, the Genomics Institute, And what we did was, with the guys, Jeff Ginsburg's team at Duke, is, and by the way, the VA was a major part of this again, they took healthy human volunteers and purposely infected them with rhinovirus, which is a cold, respiratory syncytial virus, which is a viral pneumonia, H3N2, which is, of course, a flu, and then H1N1 Brisbane, which is the more benign version of the swine flu, the H1N1. And so what they did was they infected every one of them. They followed them out for 21 days. Some patients got sick, and some didn't, typical of exposure to viruses. Measured everything in their daggone blood that you can imagine. Aphometric strips, fortunately, very cheap. And then we're able to add it to a mixed component analysis classifier, a model, a prediction model that said, when you had this fingerprint of biomarkers that committed you down that you were going to get sick. And long story short, 30 of these markers identified those patients who were going to get sick versus those who weren't. So if you express these 30 in a particular pattern, by the way, if you express these 30, you were going to get sick. If you didn't, let's pretend you had 20 of them, or 10 of them, or none of them, even though you were exposed to the rhino, you were not going to get sick. So if you had these 30, you were going to get sick. If you had these individual 5, in addition to these, you were actually going to get sick from influenza. If you had this additional 2, you were going to get sick because of RSV, and on it goes. So not only were there the generic 30 that said you were going to get sick from this viral illness, there were a couple that were very specific to the disease itself, which is way cool. This is some of the data. So at 0.1T, what is 0.1T? It is during the incubation period. Scored in the rhinovirus, as you know, that's the common cold. You have about 7 days of an incubation period before you actually get the sniffles and the flu and the cold and all that kind of good stuff. So basically, at 10% of the way of that 7 days, so about maybe 17, 18 hours in, they found that if you express that pattern, as we just said, it had 90% positive predictive value that you were going to get sick. If, on the other hand, at 0.8T, which means a day or two before you actually had symptoms, you got measured, the positive predictive value was 100%. And it goes across the board from rhino to RSV to influenza to H1N1. Very high positive predictive value. It was really super cool. What happened with this was, the follow-on was that once you had that signature, let's say here, what would happen if we treated you? We gave you Tamiflu. And so when they gave 1 dose of Tamiflu, a single dose of Tamiflu, why? Because the viral load is very low at this point. These patients who were going to go on to become symptomatically ill, they did not. So you could actually cure before they actually got sick. And that was way cool. That if you gave the treatment, the neuraminidase inhibitor for the virus at the point early on, you could change the profile. So the profile changed from being one that you're going to get sick to one you weren't going to get sick, and the patient didn't get sick. So it was really super cool that showed that, in fact, it proved the point that you could actually do that. So that is something that the military is continuing to develop because it will become a really neat approach to screening for patients and then treating for patients to maintain 100% force effectiveness. In other words, you will have no lost days to work. And I think I've run out of time, so I think I'm going to... I had one more thing, but I may have to stop here. Do I have a run out of time?
Go ahead.
All right. So this is the last thing I want to talk about. This was one of the neuroscience things. It was, what about traumatic brain injury? Because that's how I spent the other half of my life, right, was studying traumatic brain injury. The thought is that one area of the brain that gets really hurt is the hippocampus. And that's because it sits low on the temporal lobe, and the petrous ridge is right here. And so during any kind of acceleration, deacceleration, these whipping or the concussions and stuff, that part of the brain rides across this very bumpy surface and actually can get a little bit lacerated. And that will actually give you memory deficits. And so the idea is if the hippocampus stores a certain kind of memory, all right, and that it's a feed forward system through the hippocampus, and then you had a lesion there because of that, with traumatic brain injury, is there a way to restore that feed forward system by jumping the gap? Could you jump the gap? That was the whole thought. It was a very simple idea, right? Can you actually measure the electrical firing pattern on this side of the hippocampus, decode it, and then put it back as a stimulating pattern on the over where the lesion was. And that's what it was. So we decided to go and do that with really remarkable investigators, Ted Berger at USC and Sam Deadwaller at Wake. Just wonderful, wonderful investigators. And we decided first to do this in a rat model, all right? So a rat model is very, very hard. And I'll tell you what it is, and I'll show you what it is. And basically what it is, you take a rat, and you put him in a cage, and the rat is faced with 2 levers. He's got to push one lever. For argument's sake, we'll just say he pushes the right lever. Then the rat has to turn around and run to the other side of the cage, hold his nose on a bar under a light. All right? And the light is put on because it's very, very stressful for a rat. Really, it's like super stressful for a rat. Rats don't like light. Okay? Why do they not like light? Because if you ever see a rat in your basement and the light's on, you're going to hit him with a shovel. Okay? So he doesn't like light. So he's going to be sitting there under this light being totally stressed out, and while he's under that light being totally stressed out, the light will eventually go off, and the rat has to turn around and remember which lever he hit and go hit the other lever. That's what I mean by delayed non-match sample task. So it's a very hard thing for a rat to learn. Why? Because he's a rat, all right? And so it takes about 12 weeks for a rat to master this task. Now you remember, a rat's life expectancy is only about 60 days as it is, 60 days or whatever. So it's a significant portion of his life to learn how to master this task. It's like getting a PhD from Case Western Reserve in engineering, right? So, right, and it's about as stressful too. So, so the idea here is that let's teach these rats how to do this task, okay, which they did, which was really way cool. So the rat is, you'll see it. So the levers came out. See, he pushed that lever. He runs over, holds his head under the light, and he's not real happy about it. And this is a trained rat. Light goes out, and he goes and hits the other lever. Okay? So that's real simple. Real simple. All right? But this take 12 weeks for him to learn how to do this doggone thing. All right. So then what they did was we said, okay, can you develop that process? And so Ted and Sam went ahead and developed the process. They went ahead and were able to show that they could implant very stereotactically right into the hippocampus, both proximal and distal to the lesion. And then they went ahead and made a lesion. And what they did was they used MK801, which as you know is an NMDA receptor antagonist, into the CA3 region of the hippocampus. And the idea was to prevent flow of data going from CA4 to CA3 to CA2 to CA1. That's the flow. So they actually had a lesion right here at CA2 so that the CA3 is where the feed flow stops, and then can you get it back into CA1 to restore the performance on the memory task. And what they showed was, and these are the control animals, that given just 1 second delay, they were almost dead on target, and then over time, they had a decrement in performance because of the stress factor, right? Then what happens when they infused an MK801, they decreased performance dramatically, such that by 15 seconds, the animals were just, it was really random. It was just random at how it was. And even, I think this is within statistical error here, but it just became random. And then what happens when they stimulated, they brought it back up to almost near performance. And when you say stimulated, is it like global stimulation? We're just increasing arousal. The answer is no. Because it turns out what they found out was, and this is really cool, this is Ted's work, when they were sampling on the side that was proximal to the lesion, so the signals coming in, they actually were able to show that they could identify those signals associated with this multi-step task, which I thought was really way cool. And that signal basically pattern, he like to call waterfall, but that signal pattern occurred in the first 500 milliseconds of measuring. And then it was a repeat. So when they stimulate, they only gave a half a second pulse, a 500 millisecond pulse, just before they basically turn the lights on in the operant box for the animal to do the task. So it wasn't a continual stimulation to increase arousal. It was just a small burst of activity. It was very specific. And so as you'll see here is, another neat kind of thing what they did was they said, okay, prove that it really is that half a millisecond, it's not arousal. So they said, okay, what we'll do is we'll get our best rat. We get our Tiger Woods rat, get the signal that's associated with his performance, and then give it to another rat who's trained. So this is the green again, it's a control, shows you the performance. And then what they did was they went ahead and said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and give you the Tiger Woods stimulation after the ablation, and sure enough, the performance of this rat suddenly jumped up to the level of the Tiger Woods rat. Okay, that's pretty cool. What happens if I just give you nonsense? In other words, I give you a signal that is, just some white noise, all right? And it had no effect on performance. Well, what happens if I give you a signal that's the exact opposite of the signal of what you did, and then what you do is you have a decrement in performance? So really very, very cool. But that wasn't the coolest thing. I thought that was actually pretty nifty. You know, they published a lot of papers on it. They got a Nature paper out of it. It was really cool. But then I said, we started looking at the data and said, that pattern associated with that multi-step task, now that you have it, how common is it across individuals? I know that within individuals it's actually pretty good, but what about across individuals? And then we looked at it, and they said, this is what's great about being a DARPA program manager. You can actually get people to do this sort of stuff. And they said, there's about 80% homology from animal to animal to animal. So I said, wow, that's a lot more homology than I thought. So I said, why don't we do this? If we got you extra money, could you take a skilled neuronal firing pattern and dump it into an unskilled rat? Could you dump it into a rat that wasn't trained or adequately trained? And so they said, okay, let's try that. So this is a rat that's just dumped into the cage who hasn't been fully trained. And what you'll see here, he's going to do what we call exploratory behavior. He's going to go look at everything and kind of wander around and just kind of look at everything, all right? And so that's what you're going to see. So this is no stimulation. So this rat is kind of like, look, oh, that's what's this? Oh, light came on. Oh, what's this? And he's going to wander around and basically, he's just wandering around, right? All right, and that's cool. So then what happened is that we said, okay, let's give that same rat, that stimulation. Stimulate him with the donor code. Light popped out. Oh, I hit it. I hold my nose under the thing here. I stay here. I stay here. I stay here. I stay here. I don't know why I'm staying here. I stay here. I stay here. I stay here. I stay here. Long one. And then the light's on, and I go to the opposite one, and I flick the lever. And you actually have a picture of him flicking the lever. So what it showed was that you could actually transfer a skill memory to an unskilled rat, which was way cool. Subsequent to that, Sam and Ted went up to primates. They did it in primates, and Justin Sanchez has a new program now called Remind, where they're doing it in humans. And they've done their 47th human when I left the agency in December. So really cool stuff. I don't want to say what the results were. I'm going to leave it up to Justin and the wonderful team at University of Pennsylvania and UCLA that are doing it. But that is, I'm going to tell you, is totally way cool. All right? So the matrix, it's within our lifetime. So at the end of the day, I just want to say that I had a wonderful, storied career in the military. I was really grateful for having the opportunity to be at the military, as well as being at DARPA. And although I'm out now, I'm trying to continue the good fight. But it really was great, and I have wonderful friends, such as the ones I have in the room here, like Art and Hunter, who I met through my experiences, and of course my good friend Ron, who actually served with me when we were both in uniform together. So thanks a lot, you guys.
Time for questions, unless people just want to go eat.
Oh, yeah.
Regarding your protein synthesis, regarding the protein synthesis device that you showed us, what is the major innovation of that allows it to be so much cheaper? And why do you think that your initial results will generalize? Because different proteins are going to have different complex structures, which may make them more difficult to synthesize.
So I think that so that's a great question. So what is the new innovation on that platform that we saw? One of the things is the bioreactor that was invented, all right? So the bioreactor is actually very, very small. It's about this big, all right, about that thick. And what it allows optimization of the cell-free extracts, which are actually come from human cells. As you know, most cell-free extracts now the mammalian are coming from CHO cells, Chinese hamster ovary cells, and things like that. These are still mammalian cell lines, but they're still one-offs from humans. So there are a couple of things. The investigators here are able now to extract out the core components from human cells, particularly white blood cells. And that's where they're drawing out the important core components. They have developed a way of lyophilizing it so it maintains stability over a 2-year period on shelf life. So that's the second thing that's really cool. And there's a certain stabilization procedure that they use, which is proprietary, which is really cool. It's published, though, but they own the patent on it. And then what they do here is with that, you put the two together, it's such that now what's great about that is you have human cell lines. That's really, really important. Because then as you're expressing whatever protein you want, it's relevant to a human expression, right? So when you use E. coli, for example, you saw the Amyris big factory they have. Eli Lilly has a similar one. When you use E. coli, they're living cells. You got to keep them alive. They're really hard to keep alive, as you know. They're all the same genetic types. When they get infected, which they do fairly routinely, you got to clean out the whole cell line. Blah blah blah. You don't have to do any of that with the cell-free line, and so you drop costs just on that alone. the fact that you can do it locally, that is actually not such a great innovation. I mean, you probably could do it in your own lab, right? But the thing that you can, but right now, even in your own lab, though, is that working with human cell lines is still very difficult, and that's what they've conquered. So that is the big innovation. So by using it in a lab-based portable system, you've dropped the big cost of having a big factory, so that's a cost savings, so that's a front-end cost. And the back-end cost, of course, is associated with polishing and finishing, right? The extraction, the cleaning it up, because if it's made by, let's say, P. pastoris, a yeast, which is another way to make it, or E. coli, or even CHO cell extracts, is that they are not in the exact form of a human. Correct? They may have a different tertiary structure. They may have extra glycosylations. These are all things that have to be cleaned up. When you actually make it with a human cell line, actually the cleanup is much, much less. Even better, there is a potential for, if you needed insulin, that we could basically draw a tube of blood from you, extract out your white cells, extract out, make a cell-free extract from your own white cells, lyophilize it, have it on the shelf, and that way when you need your insulin, I bring that cell line back, I go ahead and put in the mRNA that will code for insulin, your own cells are going to make insulin for you. And that will greatly improve the final polish at the back end. And that is where the innovation is. So these guys show that they can make all these things right now. They show that the EPO itself is closest to the human EPO that is actually made. But as you know, it's still going to be considered a biosimilar and not a bioexact, unlike a generic small molecule organic. So a human clinical trial is going to be necessary. And that's where the proof will be in the pudding. But that's why.
You've wowed the audience.
No, it's, yeah.
It's okay, you can. Yeah, thanks. This is a wonderful talk. Very inspiring. Especially I like the first movies you showed, and I remember when I was asking for money to work with Jack Judy on one of these projects. He showed us also some videos like this. So one question about the prosthesis program. There are some issues with the Utah array.
Oh, yeah.
And solving this biocompatibility, I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
No, you're so right. But you know, I was despondent for a while, you know, and then Jack Judy came with his program that you're all familiar with, and even he was getting a little despondent when it came to the cortical arrays. He was much more excited about things that are going in the peripheral nervous system, right? And but I recently. John Donahue and the group up at Brown actually did a very nice paper when they looked at all the Utah arrays that came out and found that the failure points in a lot of their models was due to actually structural defects within the Utah array itself. So it was a fab problem. So initially everybody thought that, oh my gosh, it's a biological problem. You know, there's gliosis and yada, yada, yada. And then, it's very compelling. I mean, when you talk to John and Lee Hochberg and you look at their paper, and I've actually seen their data. I actually went up to Brown to see their data because I said, oh my God, this could be the answer. And in fact, if you take a look at their data, it's very compelling that the failure in their models, they've had these monkeys implanted for, as you know, for 5-6 years. And they find that the failures are not due to the gliosis. The gliosis happens actually very quickly, as you know. And so it's not a biological failure, it's actually a fab failure. And then I asked Andy, and then Justin Sanchez asked Andy to look at his things, the way that Donahue was, and they found out 1/3 of the BlackRock arrays actually already had structural defects in them. So it's a fab problem. And if it's a fab problem, then we actually went and engaged a Singapore group to see if they could actually conquer this fab problem. And so this group in Singapore is actually working on the fabrication thing. And I think, so right now, if it's a fab problem, that actually makes us a whole lot better. But I still say that this is all great for research, and it's great for certain patients like quadriplegics and stuff, but ultimately what we like to do is find a way, and I think this is the next DARPA program. I mean, you know, I've kind of asked Justin to kind of look into it, is really to find ways to non-invasively get those signals out. I mean, that's really going to be the enabling technology. Whoever does that, I mean, they're going to put Apple out of business. You know, so I mean, it's just, you know, it's a worthy effort. It's totally a worthy effort. And this is different. It's not chasing something. You know where the signals are. You know what the characteristics are. You know the environment that they're in. So in many ways, it's a military intel surveillance reconnaissance, ISR problem. Now, granted, it's not easy. There's going to be a lot of signal and noise and blah, 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 but it's a bounded problem. This is not an unbounded problem. You know exactly where to look. You know exactly what signals to look for.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Jeff.